Good evening and welcome to the final general election debates hosted by the DC Office of Campaign Finance. I'm Denise Rolark Barnes, publisher and owner of the Washington Informer, and I will serve as the moderator for tonight's debate. Tonight we will hear from 8 or 7 candidates competing for the office of at-large member of the DC City Council. We encourage members of the public to submit questions via the website dcdebates.com. That's dcdebates.com. And to participate online using the hashtag DCDebates. Before we get started, let's hear from the Director of the Office of Campaign Finance, Cecily Montgomery.
Good evening. Welcome to the 2022 DC Fall Debate. I'm Cecily Montgomery, Director of the Office of Campaign Finance. The 2022 DC debates are the third slate of debates under the Fair Elections Program. Started in 2018, the FEP is a voluntary public financing program operated by the Office of Campaign Finance to support candidates for local political office in the District of Columbia. All FEP participating candidates for citywide races are required to take part in the debates. It is our hope that these debates will help the public to learn more about the candidates, their positions, and policy platforms. We want to take a moment to thank our partner organizations and the candidates for participating in the process. Thank you for joining us in our mission to help inform DC voters about the Fair Elections Program candidates and their positions. To learn more about the Office of Campaign Finance or the 2022 DC debates, please visit dcdebates.com. The debates will remain on the website through Election Day, November the 8th, for those who could not watch or listen live this evening. Thank you for your support, and with that, let's meet our candidates.
The candidates for tonight's debate are Frederick Hill III, a small business owner and veteran; Kenyan McDuffie, the current Ward 5 council member; McLaughlin, an operations and financial management executive; Karim Marshall, third-generation Washingtonian and public servant; Elissa Silverman, the current at-large council member; Giuseppe Niosi, third-generation Washingtonian and small business owner; and Anita Bonds, also current member of the DC City Council. Here are the ground rules for tonight's debate. Candidates will have 1 minute for an opening statement, 60 seconds or 1 minute for a direct answer to a question, and 30 seconds for a rebuttal. Each candidate will then have 1 minute for closing remarks. If candidates wish to respond to an opponent's answer, raise your hand and I will be sure to call on you as time permits. With that, we will move to opening statements, and we will start with Mr. Niosi. Welcome.
Thank you very much. My name is Giuseppe Niosi, and I'm running to be your next at-large council. I'm a third-generation Washingtonian, born and raised in Northeast. I'm a husband, a systems engineer, a Naval Reserve officer. Most importantly, I'm a concerned citizen who thinks the council has lost touch with their voters of DC. My platform is public safety, education, fiscal responsibility. As I've been door knocking through talking to community leaders, as if the biggest things that are on people's minds are they're safe, that people are safe, people are learning in their, or that they're getting a quality education, and that our community leaders are making sure that our small businesses are getting the attention that they need.
Thank you, Mr. Niosi. We will move now to Mr. Niosi. Thank you. Thank you very much. Your time is up. Now we will move on to Council Member Silverman. And we need some any sound from Councilmember Silverman. At least I'm not. Okay, Councilmember Silverman, we're going to come back to you. Mr. Marshall?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your afternoon to ask questions and learn about you. My name is Karim Marshall. I'm a third-generation Washingtonian, a husband, a father, and a product of DC Public Schools. In fact, public schools are so important to me because they're the reason I was able to have such a strong success in life. As a product of DCPS, I was able to get into an Ivy League college, do well in that college, and then become a lawyer. I have 12 years of government experience, so I've spent the bulk of my career serving my residents and serving the government. And I would love to bring that experience and that opportunity of making DC a better place to you as your next at-large council member. The three things that are most important to me are to make sure that we have safe streets, an education system that works for all of our learners, and enough housing so that people don't get priced out of the city.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Mr. McLaughlin?
Good evening. My name is Karim McLaughlin. I've been in DC 20 years trying to make a difference in every way that I can. For example, I didn't just say, gosh, we need more affordable housing. I opened my home to guys coming out of prison, and we built intentional community for a decade. I didn't just say, we need to support young people. I mentored 2 boys for 8 years, was a CASA for foster youth, and have volunteered in the juvenile detention center at YSC. I didn't just say we need to end the income equality gap. I'm on the board of a nonprofit accelerator and venture firm for Black and women-owned businesses, and I've worked with a number of returning citizens to launch their own businesses that now hire 40 DC residents. But it's not just as an individual. At scale, I run a health equity program at one of the largest global organizations in the world that serves over 100 million people annually. You have a decision to make. Do you want change, or do you want more of the same? I believe that I have the qualifications to serve and the heart to lead as well. I would love one of your 2 votes for DC Council at Large.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. We'll now go back to Councilmember Silverman.
Good evening, Denise. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh, wonderful. Well, great to join everyone. Thank you to all the sponsors. I'm Elissa Silverman. I'm currently serving as your council member, and I'm an independent. I'm asking for your vote tonight. You're going to hear from all of us about how we care deeply about public safety, public education, affordable housing, and jobs, and we all do. The challenge for you as a voter is to figure out who is the best choice. If you are a voter who thinks we need to spend your tax dollars better, hold DC government more accountable, and follow through to see those tax dollars pay off, I'm your candidate. We are facing a lot of challenges in this city, and I've dealt with big challenges. Redistricting this city, I was in charge of that. We got it done. And I think the secret there was hearing all voices. Paid family leave, another big issue I've dealt with. Managed a coalition of support inside and outside government. Work with those who opposed it.
Thank you, Councilmember Silverman. You've run out of time.
And we've delivered benefits for working families. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to Councilmember McDuffie.
Thank you, Denise. My name is Kenyan McDuffie. I'm a 4th-generation Washingtonian, a husband, and father of 2 daughters. And for 10,502 days, I was a Democrat representing Ward 5 on the council. I'm running to be your next at-large council member to create safer neighborhoods with greater economic opportunities for every resident across our city. I'm running because growing up in the 1980s and 90s, I saw firsthand the toll that drugs, violence, and hopelessness took on our city. And it was an opportunity to be a mail carrier with the U.S. Postal Service that literally changed my entire life's trajectory and put me on a path to become the first man in my family to graduate from college, work for Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, and to graduate from law school. It was my desire to improve my own community and change the odds for those struggling around me that first led me to run for public office. And I'm running today because now more than ever, the council needs bold leaders with track records of delivering results, real results. to help to create a city that is more equitable, more just, and more inclusive.
Thank you, Councilmember McDuffie. And Mr. Hill.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Fred Hill, and I am a business owner successfully for over 25 years here in the district. I've hired over 500 DC residents, 180 returning citizens, and quite frankly, I got sick and tired of watching our government just ignore the needs of the people. We've heard that there are 3 council incumbents that are on this call tonight asking for your vote again, when the 8, 10, and 12 club haven't done what they should have done the last terms, 2 and 3 terms that they've had. They all voted to defund our police department, which sent this city into a downward spiral of public safety. We have the Family Medical Leave Act that is ignoring 94,000 DC residents and thereby on the other side taking care of the Maryland residents. Our education system right now is going south at a rapid rate. So I intend to change that. Vote me first for one of those 2 seats as your council at large.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. So now we're going to jump into the questions. I think everybody did it. No, Councilmember Bonds, I have not given you the opportunity. Please go. Since someone's missing.
My goodness. Well, thank you very much. And good evening to everyone. My thanks to the forum organizers and to the public that has joined us tonight. I'm hearing an echo.
You're coming across fine.
Please.
You're fine.
And I'm also hearing your comments, whoever you may be.
I don't know if we're having a problem with the audio. Is something? We've stopped the clock, Councilmember Bonds. We're going to see what's happening.
All right, thank you. Okay. All right, thank you very much. I'm Anita Bonds, the Democratic nominee for at-large council, and proud to have won the June primary and represent Democrats citywide. I'm a former ANC chairperson, an accomplished public administrator, private sector executive, a nonprofit leader, academic program director, and longstanding activist for women, civil, and LGBT rights. I'm a product of DC Public Schools and attended the University of California, Berkeley, raised my family in wards 8, 2, and 5, and grew up in ward 7. I've also served as the Democratic Party leader and attend Founder United Methodist Church, and I am one of my mom's caregivers. I joined the council on 12/12/12, and since then I've represented the interests of the residents and workers and businesses citywide and attended to numerous concerns.
Thank you, Councilmember Bonds.
I'm so sorry. I'm still hearing that. Please.
Yeah, the minute is up, though. I think we got your opening statement, so we want to thank you. We heard you. You came through clear. So we're going to go to the questions now. Starting with you, Mr. Hill. Many DC voters often, and those that run for office, understand the role and responsibility of a council member. And in this case, an at-large member understand the role differently, particularly an at-large member. Please share what you believe your role will be and what constituents should be able to expect from you if you win the seat.
Thank you very much for that question. And what I understand as the responsibility is that there is full representation of everyone across the city. There are many different issues, as I named a few: public safety, education, healthcare, all of these are very important issues, but what we haven't had is the true attention that is needed for all people. The council at large position would present legislation that would help balance out the quality of life for everyone in the city, not just a select few. And I tend to be that council member that can bring, with my veterans experience of operation and execution, and then also 25 years of successful business as a fiscally responsible business owner. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McDuffie.
Thank you for the question, Denise. The role, obviously, of the council member is to legislate and provide rigorous oversight and hold government agencies accountable to deliver services, particularly to those who have the greatest unmet needs. But it's also to show up. All the work of the council member doesn't just happen down at the Wilson Building. And although I've represented Ward 5 for the last 10 years, I've shown up in communities across the District of Columbia, making sure that they know that they have a champion for their issues. When it comes to public safety, I showed up in Ward 8 and Ward 7, Ward 5, to make sure that they understand that when they hear violence and shots and they experience the trauma from public safety, that they have a champion who's going to represent their issues down at the Wilson Building. It's the same for public safety, housing affordability, education, and the issues that matter most to residents, regardless of where they live. And so it's legislation, oversight, and showing up to deliver services to the people who need the help the most.
Thank you. Mr. McLaughlin?
Well, as Kenyan said, I mean, it is being a steward of the budget in oversight, and we need folks who really thoughtfully consider, with a $19.5 billion budget, how do we spend that money most effectively to support people across the city? I think you as voters have to decide now. We have the most money per resident of any city in the nation. Is it getting to you? And I do agree that we need to show up. I think we need to show up before things happen, not just after. How are we getting ahead of problems to invest in the way that we get to root causes, as well immediately take action on problems now? What I see as the major role of a council member is to work across all 13 council members, to work with the executive and to work with the community to make policy grounded in who is most impacted, whether that's parents, students, etc., and then be able to not in public have performative actions where you blast somebody you disagree with, but to work behind the scenes to really make high quality decisions that are going to help every person in the city.
Thank you so much. Mr. Marshall.
Thank you for the question. In particular, I love this question because it gets to my unique value proposition as a candidate. The three aspects of doing this job are to write good law, to build a reasonable budget, and to make sure that you're conducting oversight throughout the course of the year. Now, out of everybody who's running for this position right now, I am the only person who has 12 years of experience in the executive. When it comes to conducting oversight, to understanding the thought and the reasoning behind how the executive does what it does, I've worked for 3 mayors. I'm the only person who has the on-the-ground understanding of the executive to be able to conduct oversight in a way that doesn't just look like me screaming at an executive. It looks like being able to work with them and deliver for the residents of the District of Columbia. As far as building budgets, I've helped build 4. And as far as writing legislation, I've written more than 20 bills myself, not directed staff to do it, but I've worked with stakeholders to write legislation that not only gets through the executive, but also gets through the legislature passed completely. I've also written more than 100 pieces.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Councilmember Silverman?
Yes, Denise, so our main job is to better the lives of district residents and businesses. And you have 4 basic tools to do that. Everyone said legislation. I agree. You also need to make sure that you have the resources in place. Because if you pass a law, but there's no money for it, then it's really just an empty promise. Rigorous oversight. That is something that I am known for, Denise. With paid family leave, for example, that got delivered on time, under budget, because I kept I had hearings to make sure it did. And constituent services, and I think that's something no one has mentioned here, but actually at-large members do quite a bit. is perform constituent services. Some of the most gratifying moments I have as a council member is when you can solve problems on an individual level, whether it's a tax issue at the Office of Tax and Revenue for a business, or
Thank you, Councilmember
get a housing
Silverman.
law.
Time
That's what it
runs
is.
short, so we have to keep moving on.
I
Mr.
appreciate
Niosi?
Thank you for the question. I just want to say that I am having the same problem as Anita Bonds. I hear the tech in my ear, and I just want to make sure that that's addressed. But I believe that a council member needs to be accountable to the people of Washington, D.C. That includes all 8 wards. As I've been door knocking and talking to people, they feel as if the council has lost touch. And I believe that bringing with me accountability, transparency, integrity, and hard work and effort will make the council a better place. As a Naval Reserve officer and systems engineer, I believe that my skills that I've learned from the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy and traveling around the world to 6 out of 7 continents will make the council a more well-rounded and bring forth a diversity of perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Bonds?
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much. I'm still hearing the echo, but I will plow through this. Okay, yes. The most important aspects of the job of council member is to represent your constituents, which are at large, it's the entire city, and that is to represent their interests and their concerns. And that comes in the form of making sure that there is legislation that addresses those concerns and their interests, as well as you have to spend your time focused on the aspects of making sure that the agencies are producing. And I take great interest in understanding that these agencies are also under the guidance of the executive. I've worked for the executive for many years, starting in 1979, and that went through 1990. So I think I have a little more years at that task. But my point is, it takes more than just being a legislator. It really does require you to have the opportunity representing the citizens' opinions.
Thank you, Councilmember Bonds. And I'm not sure if you're having a difficult time hearing me. And I hope that folks can fix the problem that a couple of you all are having. I have an IFB that would rather sit on my shoulder than stay in my ear. So we're all having technical problems this evening. But I think we're doing well. The DC Council recently approved the emergency creation of the Office of Migrant Services in response to the hundreds of migrants who have landed in DC in the last 6 months. But some advocates have expressed concerns that the law doesn't offer the same protections afforded to citizens experiencing homelessness. How do you plan, through legislation or any plan that you have, to balance the needs of the migrants sent from other states with the needs of the unhoused in the District of Columbia? And Councilmember Bonds, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you very much for that question. Yes, the echo continues, and it's very distracting, so please forgive me. It's very annoying. Well, I was one of those council members that voted in support of the new Office of Migrant Services, and I stand by that. And I stand by that because we are not understanding yet in the District of Columbia the extent of the influx of the migrants, as well as what the needs are. And I think making sure that we understand those issues first and foremost is tantamount to us really coming up with a prescription and determining whether or not these are individuals who meet the requirements for our, let's say, for instance, our homeless plan. So I'm very much supportive of what we have already accomplished. I think there will be a hearing in a few weeks, maybe 10 days, and we will learn more, and then we can begin to make additional applications.
Thank you so much. Mr. Niosi, what's your plan?
I'm asking Renee what she's hearing.
Thank you very much for the question. As we all know, that Washington, D.C. has been declared a sanctuary city by our mayor and our council. I can't hear anymore. Our residents did not have a voice in the matter. They didn't have a vote in the matter of whether or not the city was declared a sanctuary city. And I believe that it cost our taxpayers roughly $10 million. That being the case, adversity has come our way, and we will prevail. I believe that we need to ensure that our migrants are taken care of and make sure that they're getting the resources that they need to find ways to plant their roots into our society. Our homeless issue is an entirely different issue, in my opinion, because I believe that it stems from a lot of mental health and a lot of just job, or not having a robust enough economy for people to get the jobs that they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Silverman?
Yes, Denise. So let's be clear. What's going on is a cruel, political scheme by GOP governors in Texas and Arizona to highlight federal immigration policy and use us and these people who are, like many of us, came to the United States to try to better their lives, and they're here legally. I think the Office of Migrant Services is the right thing to do. I think we waited too long to do it. But where the difference was, so almost everyone, it was a 12-0 vote, one of us voted present. Where the difference was in terms of making sure that there was full access in terms of people who might be migrants and also decide to stay in the district, and whether they could access our homeless services system, and also prioritizing families with children to make sure that they could have their own place and not live in congregate settings. That's where there was a 9-4 vote. I was one of the council members who voted to make sure people have access.
All right. Thank you so much. Mr. Marshall?
Thank you for the question. So I think we actually want to agree with Councilmember Silverman on this, and that this is clearly people playing politics with other people's lives, and it's heartbreaking. So I appreciate the fact that the government is attempting to do something to address the unanticipated arrival of these people who are seeking a better life. I've actually run into a couple of residents who had a lot of questions about this, and we have to be really clear. This is an attempt to pit one group of disadvantaged persons against another. We have to be very clear about that, and we have to reject it. But what we absolutely have to do is make sure that we are leading with a sense of respecting the humanity of the people who are trying to escape really unfortunate conditions. We have to do what we can in order to make sure that they are treated with humanity as long as they're in the District of Columbia, and that they are set up for success wherever they go next or whether they stay here.
Thank you. Mr. McLaughlin?
Yeah, I think we're going to all be pretty aligned here, and I'm proud to be a DC resident with the way the council and the mayor have handled this. I mean, we are talking, as Karim and Elissa talked about, trafficking human beings for political gain. It's unconscionable, and I'm so proud of DC that we are working to treat every single person who comes to this city with the dignity and divinity that they have. This is an issue. We have limited resources to support a significant number of people. And I do agree with Karim. I don't think we want a Jamestown moment here where we're trying to pit, sort of current residents versus migrants coming in, et cetera, for services. I appreciate what the council is trying to navigate on this. I agree with the way that they're approaching it, the compassion that they're approaching it. I think it goes back to how are we thinking about the longer term aspects of a society that creates opportunity, how we increase our housing stock and our affordable housing stock. So I think these are long-term solutions. But I agree with the way the council is handling this, and the three colleagues who are on here now, I commend.
Thank you. Mr. McDuffie.
Thank you. Yeah, I would agree with most of what's been said. The reality is you got two governors from Republican states in Texas and Arizona that are callously playing political games with people's lives, and it's repulsive. It's abominable. So the reality is what we're doing in the District of Columbia, there are jurisdictions around the country who can learn a lesson about what it means to come together, to work to get things done. I want to thank, as I stated previously, Brandon Doe, the mayor, for working together to come up with a solution that addresses this problem that's created because of politics. The reality is we have to put the resources in place to provide the services for migrant families, but not pit them against our unhoused residents. We have the resources to do both. We can walk and chew gum. We just need to make sure we're doing both in the most humane way possible.
Mr. Hill.
Thank you so much. I'm one who sees things a little bit differently when it comes to who all chose to come to this country. I see the same game being played as it was played with my ancestors many years ago. When we talk about the migrants versus our homeless residents that have been here before they came. This is a humanitarian crisis. And what we don't need to get caught up in is how we massage the movement of money to take care of some without taking care of all. And this, again, is what we're beginning to see, where they say it's one against the other. But we watched in this city for a very long time how our homeless residents were not taken care of. And we're not given the attention that they see so many other people getting right now. I call for a more balanced, inclusive resolve to this problem. And it takes a group of people to come to understand there is no line drawn between the same.
Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about crime and gun violence, an issue that is really disconcerting to many residents in the city, and I'm sure members of the council and those of you all who are running for the council. As a matter of fact, it's been listed as a top concern, and I think everyone is trying to find a solution. The word always is, we've got to do something. So I'd like to know if you become a member of, are re-elected to the council, become an at-large member to the DC City Council, what legislation would you put in place to address the crime issues that that are affecting our community? And I'm going to start with you, Mr. McLaughlin.
Thank you. It is certainly the number one issue that I would guess all of us, but certainly I'm hearing across the city, across every single ward, across every single individual of any background. And it's not one solution. So I'm going to hit a bunch, but we only have a minute. So I do think we need to adequately fund the police in order to be able to handle their portion of the response. I think we need to provide them the technical infrastructure to be able to staff effectively, to be able to be supported effectively, and to do their jobs versus triage and only be able to hit certain cases. And then hold them accountable for disclosure rates, for their behavior with citizens, etc. But I don't think we can ask the police to do everything. We also need behavioral health teams. We also need substance use specialists to be able to address all of the different types of cases that we're seeing. And then we need to think longer term as well about how do we support individuals in crises, not just for a night or two and then to come back on the street, but for long-term behavioral health support. And then we need to get
Councilmember Silverman.
Yes, I think that perception is reality here, in that people are feeling unsafe. And what my approach would be is for the council to truly have a focus. And I think Councilmember Allen, chair of the Judiciary Committee, has a big committee. I think in the next session, we should narrow the responsibilities. I think in terms of violence interruption, we're putting more money into that. I would propose that we not have two different violence interruption agencies. We should consolidate to one so we have a menu of services that's uniform. I also think we should look at the Police Reform Commission recommendations and implementing the behavioral health recommendation, implementing the recommendation to move some of the things that aren't related to directly to public safety that would be better suited for DPW or DDOT in terms of traffic and parking issues, to take that off the plate of MPD.
Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
McDuffie.
Thank you, Denise. If elected, when elected, I'm going to ask to be a member of the Public Safety Committee, because when I chaired the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety, I ushered in the NEAR Act, which brought a public health-based solution to crime prevention and intervention in the District of Columbia that emphasized the need for both accountability and opportunity. Accountability for people who commit crimes in our city, particularly crimes of violence, to be held accountable in our system of justice. Accountability for police officers who over-police and don't do their jobs in a way that is thoughtful and engaging in community policing in the way that residents would like to see and businesses would like to see. But we have to talk about the opportunity side of this to make sure we're ushering in those resources into communities that have been long neglected and marginalized. We've got a plan that takes into account the things that you're hearing. I wrote the bill. I know what it says. We need to make sure that we're eliminating the lines and layers and red tape so that the Office of the Attorney General's Cure Streets model works in concert with the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. The Director of Gun Violence Prevention is having regular meetings, bringing together and leading on these issues in a way that makes people safe.
Thank you, Mr. McDuffie. Mr. Marshall.
Thank you. So I think we need to actually start with acknowledging that people are afraid. And I think that's one of the things that's driving this debate. We're trying to have a discussion about people's fears without acknowledging those fears. And people are afraid, and that's fair. But we also have to acknowledge that the crime that we're dealing with is the result of 20 years of deliberate disinvestment from particular parts of the city in concentrating poverty. So in order for us to really address the crime issue, we have to address the under-resourcing issue. We need to be very deliberate about making sure that we reevaluate what police are doing. No one on this panel believes that a person with a gun is the best suitable response to somebody having a mental health crisis at 2 o'clock in the morning. But we haven't yet structured our government in a way to be able to provide that 24-hour crisis response that's necessary to send a mental health professional over as opposed to a police officer who's got a gun and a command voice. We also need to reevaluate the way we do youth rehabilitation. Right now, we have a contact with the youth and we send him back out to the same environment he came from with the ankle bracelet on. All that does is guarantee that he's going to come back. If we have the chance to talk about it later, I'd love to talk about the way we deal with it.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Hill.
Thank you for the question. As I said before, the police officers, our educators, as well as our fire emergency staff and our sanitation workers all should receive a 30% pay raise because they are grossly underpaid. This is also a result from the public safety, as I said before, where 3 of the council incumbents that are here tonight voted to defund our police. I've never seen anyone dial love, peace, or understanding, but when everybody gets in trouble, they dial 911. When it speaks to our youth, when we have them in custody for something wrong they did, such as first or second degree murder, then we need to force them to go to school while we have them in custody. Of course, there needs to be an investment of mental health that hasn't been done before, which has led a lot of this to go unanswered when the police come out to answer. I do not think that our police should be going out to continue triage on those things. They are there to remove the threat, to remove harm from the person or the people in the community. And once they're in custody, then we can give the care that's needed.
Next to Council Member Bonds.
Thank you very much. That's a very important question that we have on the table now. And I think that we have to start with looking at the police services because that's what the public looks at first and foremost. And I think that we have to be careful as to how our police officers are assigned. One of the biggest hurdles we're facing is the lack of respect for our officers in community. And that has a lot to do with how we are reacting in community and showing a disregard for so-called authority. And so I think looking at how the officers are assigned would be one of the things that we really have to focus on. A second thing, when we're talking about the officers, might as well talk a little bit about how important it would be to have the officers available near school grounds or campuses when young people are on the way to school and when they're leaving school after school. I think
Thank
those
you,
are some of the
Councilmember
things that we
Bonds.
need to look closer at. Yes.
Great.
The other thing,
Mr. Niosi?
oh, okay, echo starts again.
Thank you for the question. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We already have the answers that we're looking for. Having done ride-alongs with our local police, I found that they're understaffed, undertrained, and they lack some of the adequate resources that they need to do their jobs. We need to adequately fund our police. We need to make sure that they're well-trained and accountable to the communities that they serve and everyone in Washington, D.C. That being said, I do believe that the premise of some of these newly created violence interrupter programs have great merit, and I think that it would be nice to see how they are in the next 5 years, because I believe that proper mentorship to our youth is vitally important to make sure that they're on the right track in life. But this is not a substitute for police. This is not something that we should do as an alternative, but is something to bolster what we currently have. The bottom line is the council needs to make sure that the police are funded adequately, well-staffed, and well-trained and accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bonds mentioned having police presence around schools. I know that the council voted earlier this year to gradually remove police officers from schools and to replace them with resource individuals. Just by show of hands, how many of you all would have supported that legislation today?
I supported it.
Oh, I hear it.
What's the question?
So how many of you would have supported that legislation or that bill to gradually remove police officers from schools and to replace them with resource officers? For those who did not raise their hands, and I'll start with you, Mr. Hill, can you explain why?
Well, right now we have enough evidence to show that not having someone of authority when our kids are not even feeling safe to walk to school is worse when they get to school and they find out someone there has a gun. A resource officer or a violence interrupter is not going to do any good. And as I said before, when those situations come about, we need someone who actually has the ability and the authority to bring calm to the situation, to minimize the harm that could come to one. If we know that there are people there that don't have that ability, you're going to see more guns coming into these schools. And I disagree with pulling the officers from the schools.
If I'm not mistaken, Mr. McLaughlin, you did not raise your hand either?
I apologize. I was having some trouble hearing. I support school resource officers, but like the move from police to trained specific, officers for schools, so school resource officers.
Okay, Mr. Marshall.
So my challenge with the way we've approached dealing with security around schools is that we've treated external threats that might harm our children just as aggressively as we've treated misbehavior of children in schools. I'd like to move away from anything that resembles a carceral state as far as having guns in our schools with people who are trained to use those guns potentially against our students. I don't want our kids to psychologically be acclimated to seeing guns and people who are supposed to be shepherding them through life. Now, if we're talking about securing the perimeter of the school, I'm fine with that. But I don't want armed guards patrolling inside our school, policing our students' activities.
And Mr. Niosi, I don't think you raised your hand either.
That is correct. Having a great conversation with a school during the National Night Out, it was made very clear that they want, or at least this specific school wanted to have police officers, because frankly, they build the rapport with our communities, and it starts with our children and their parents. So I believe that we should keep police officers, if anything, to make sure that it bolsters our community and brings more harmony to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. And
Denise?
Mr. McDuffie.
Yes.
Yeah,
I had my hand
I
up
want to
because
come. Yeah, I want you and Councilmember Silverman and Councilmember Bonds to talk about why you would continue to support that, what you voted for.
Because the research demonstrates that having police in schools doesn't make kids safer. And in actuality, it means that many kids, often Black and brown kids, disproportionately are being introduced into our justice system. I understand the need for parents and others to want their kids to feel safe, but it doesn't mean that they have to have armed officers inside our schools to ensure that. It's why I've supported safe passages programs. It's why I've worked diligently with the organizations closest to the community to make sure that we're supporting our young folks to get to and from school safely, but also working with other organizations like Black Women for Justice to talk about the types of programs that are happening inside our schools. We've gotten away from vocational programs, teaching kids how to be electricians like my dad was, like plumbing, carpenters, being able to get quality skills that are in demand today. And we need to work with those types of organizations, work with Peace for DC and other organizations to make sure that we are actually addressing the opportunity side. I think opportunity for a lot of these kids who feel hopeless.
Thank you. Let me move on really quick
to being safe.
To Councilmember Silverman.
Denise, I was compelled by the Police Reform Commission. The Police Reform Commission said that we should not have police in schools. And I remembered back, and I told this to my colleagues, in 2004, when MPD was put in the schools. There was somebody who died in school, a very violent incident at Ballou. And Robert Bobb, who was the head of the Police Reform Commission, was the city administrator at that time. And the decision was made to put police in the schools to make it safer, but it hasn't been safer. And I was very compelled by Mr. Bobb's, recommendation that we should not reintroduce, that we should actually take police, but gradually phase out. Of course, we want to keep people safe on the property, but what we really need to do is the interventions that prevent these interactions from happening, these violent incidents from happening.
Thank you. And Councilmember Bonds.
Yes, I mentioned that point earlier simply because I wanted to make it clear that having officers in the schools is very frightening to many young people who are not prone to carry a weapon, who are just there for an education. And we want to give them an opportunity to grow and to thrive and to really move forward with their lives. And having the officers there has been proven to be a deterrent, believe it or not. The other point that I wanted to make, as we talk about our young people having an opportunity, I think we are very clear that in the District of Columbia, many of our young people graduate or leave the school system and they're looking for jobs. But what they're not looking for is sitting on the corner and not having an opportunity for a job. And I think one of the things that we can do as a deterrent is to hook or link a young person that is leaving the school to a bona fide job so that they know that the subsequent training that they receive will really deliver, a job, money in their pocket, money for their family.
It's, the sound I'm getting in my ear right now says that we are, I can't believe it, almost out of time. And I've got about 20 more questions that I wanted to pose to you all. But the second highest priority, we want to get this in, as you all know, addresses the issue of affordable housing. And also addressing the rents, the high rents that DC residents have to pay. How would you tackle this issue to make DC a more affordable place to live through any piece of legislation that you've already proposed that needs to be implemented, or that you would introduce? Mr. Hill, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you so much for that question. I said earlier that our police, our fire emergency staff, and our public school system staff, along with sanitation workers, should get a 30% pay raise. This will put them in a position of where they are on or above the average median income. That is a pilot to show that this is what needs to be done with our DC government employees. Now, that money comes from the almost $1 billion that the city is slated to spend or lose through waste and abuse right now by not overseeing, by not managing the money as they should. When we talk about unaffordable housing, I say that the housing standards should be looked at according to income. Right now, we use the AMI, which is the average median income, which includes Fairfax County and Montgomery County. And the two richest counties in the nation are part of what drives Washington, D.C. unaffordable for a lot of people.
Thank you. Mr. Niosi.
Thank you for the question. It's no joke that Washington, D.C. has some of the highest prices in housing nationwide. I believe that we should be increasing the supply, especially in underserved communities. But I'd like to focus on the bigger issue, because the bigger issue is we need to have a more robust local economy so people can have the job, and we need to make sure that they have proper skill developmental training so they can get the job that they want. Because frankly, it's very expensive to be in poverty. You can't incur any sort of savings to someday buy your first house. So I'd like to also incentivize first-time homebuyer assistance programs. I think there's a lack of government transparency insofar as people don't know that they're available. Because I'd like to take us from a vicious cycle and incorporate a virtuous cycle where people are buying their first house, supporting their community, and thriving in a robust local economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marshall?
So this is a really complicated issue, and I'm sure all of us have a lot more to say about this than we can in a minute. So I'm going to refer you to my website, marshallfordc.com. But there are three things that I can hit on really quickly. We're experiencing a supply failure. We don't have enough in housing for the District of Columbia based on our population. The plan back in 2000 was to get us to 700,000 residents, and now that we're here, we don't have enough places to put all of these residents. So that's why prices are so expensive. We also need to take better advantage of our existing resources. Public housing for low-income persons is about 50% vacant. And if we could actually get those units so that they were habitable, we could actually take a lot of this pressure off of the housing market. We also have about 10,000 vacant units that we can actually activate with very reasonable accommodations. And then finally, we need to really increase our stewardship as the council of the Housing Production Trust Fund, because the council has not done a great job of being able to manage the use of those funds and making sure that they are going towards people who need it the most.
Thank you. Councilmember Silverman?
Yes, Denise, we need to build housing for working families, not housing to benefit developers. Right now, we are building housing that developers want to build, not housing that we need. So what do? We need to optimize our tools. Number one, the trust fund, as was mentioned. We've never followed the law on how to spend that money, especially for people who make the minimum wage. We need to follow the law. Inclusionary zoning, jargon term, what is that? When people build buildings, we need more affordable units from those developers who get the density bonus. And we need to play hardball. If an apartment building, especially one that's rent controlled, goes up for sale, then the district needs to look at using something called district opportunity to purchase to keep that building affordable. We need to build housing for us, not for developers.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yeah, answering the question directly, 3 areas. Zoning, number 1, I agree with Karim. How do we expand supply? Open up 2 and 4 units to broader zoning and work with faith institutions to allow them to create affordable housing on their land. Preservation, I think we should allocate more money to preservation, which is much cheaper than production. And I salute Councilmember Bonds, who's done incredible work in this area, but help seniors stay in their homes with support from legislation and other ways, and not have property taxes increase so much on them that they can't stay there. And then third, and the most important, push towards ownership, whether that's land trust, limited equity co-ops, or supporting more on some of the things that the mayor has done with Black Home Ownership Fund and HPAP. Those are three areas that I would focus on: zoning, preservation, and pathways to ownership.
Thank you. Mr. McDuffie? We don't have any sound.
Thanks. I am seated right now in the house that my grandparents bought back in 1952 for $5,000. And yet the home right next door recently sold for $900,000. Now, me and my wife are both first-generation college graduates, dual degree, but we can't afford to buy houses for nearly $1 million. And that's just a sign of what kind of housing crisis that we're living in today. And it's one of the reasons why that personal experience led me to author legislation that invests 50% of our budget surplus into the Housing Production Trust Fund, which has been stated as a primary tool that we use to preserve existing housing to make it affordable, as well as produce new units of affordable housing. I also authored a bill that when the district leases our property for residential development, we require 20% be set aside for affordable across income levels. And it goes up to 30% when it's close to mass transit. And so it's another thing that I think is important that we have to recognize. We have to support greater investments like I've done and others in workforce housing west of Rock Creek Park, because housing affordability should be true in west of the park as well as east of the park, and it should be accessible to people and families of income levels.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McDuffie. And Councilmember Bonds?
Thank you very much. I appreciate hearing from the panel this evening, because housing is one of the issues that's very dear to me. I think all of them know that many of the proposals that they are mentioning tonight are things that we are already doing. We are putting money in rent control. We're putting money in ownership. We're putting money in opportunities for improvement of our public housing stock, fixing some of the broken units, as I call it, where we have a vacancy of about 400, not 10,000. We're also using the vouchers to get people into market rate units in neighborhoods that are also very important to us. We're doing a number of things. Most importantly, throughout my tenure of 8 years with the Housing Committee,
Councilmember Bonds, I'm sorry, your time is up.
Okay.
Thank you, thank you.
And I can't help if I hear this stuff.
No problem. Well, it's a problem, but I'm sorry. And it is a problem that we've come to the end of this conversation tonight. Like I said, there's so many other issues that we could have addressed this evening had time permitted, but we have come to the end of our program, and it's more of a discussion and not a debate. But the question and answer portion of the evening is over, and we'll now provide each one of you an opportunity to make a closing statement. You have 1 minute to do so. And so if you talk quickly, you might be able to touch on some points that you wanted to touch on that we didn't get to. So I'm going to start with you, Councilmember Silverman.
Thank you. Denise, thanks so much for the opportunity to talk about issues important to us. Again, I'm Elissa Silverman. It's been my honor to serve 8 years as your at-large council member. I'm an independent. I have been since I got on the council in 2015, and I am asking for your vote tonight. What I've done these past 8 years is focus on the important things, make the key investments, and actually follow through holding the government accountable, keeping residents and businesses always in mind, because my goal is to make our lives better here in the District of Columbia. So thanks for the opportunity to answer the questions and talk a little bit more about both the great parts of our city and the challenges we face. I think I have the tools to meet the challenge these next 4 years. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Mr. Niosi?
Thank you again for the opportunity. I know that was an interesting little curveball with the technical difficulties, but I'm glad that we got it straightened away. So, life moves on. So thank you for that. Again, my name is Giuseppe Niosi. I'm an engineer, a naval officer in the reserve, and I'm looking to be your next council member at large. I'm asking you again for your vote this evening, coming up on Election Day. My platform is better education and educational opportunities for all, fiscal responsibility and a strong local economy, and public safety. Together, we can write this next chapter and launch the district's comeback. I really appreciate it, and thank you very much again.
Thank you. And Councilmember Bonds.
All right. Well, thank you very much for this opportunity, and thanks to those who were listening this evening with us. I want them to know that a vote for Anita is a vote for steady, honest, impactful leadership dedicated to the services of the people of the District of Columbia. And that includes enacting reasonable laws, supporting quality living, and making community streets and our schools safe. It also is about expanding affordable housing citywide and services to our children and our seniors and returning citizens and our most vulnerable residents, and working with the community to turn our local economy around for our residents, our workers, and our businesses. And so I am asking for your support in the November general election. I'm number 5 on the ballot. And thank you very much for this evening.
Thank you. Mr. McLaughlin?
You have 7 talented folks who care deeply about the city that you can decide to vote for. I would ask, do you want to continue as things are? You have 3 talented council members who you know what you're going to get from them. They have 8+ years each on the council. Or you can vote for change. You heard about some of my background at the beginning of this discussion. You've heard all of our answers. I think I have the qualifications to lead and the heart to serve. I would love to think about how we can steward our $19.5 billion budget, the most per resident of the nation, to really create the greatness that this city can be and to support every single person in reaching their full potential. I ask for one of your 2 votes to represent you and work incredibly hard for you as one of your at-large council members.
Thank you. Mr. Marshall.
Thank you, Ms. Rolark Barnes. So again, my name is Karim Marshall, and I'm asking for your vote this November. If you see what I see, and if you feel how I feel about how this city has gone over the last 8 to 12 years, you know that it's time for a change. We're grateful to the council members who are on this panel for their years of service. However, they're not prepared to do what needs to be done over the next few years to turn this city around. I am. I have more than 12 years of experience in working in the executive. I'm a successful practicing attorney, and I've actually worked in delivering programs. I will give you a government that works for you. And I promise you, I can promise you right now that if you elect me to council, you will see a level of performance and accountability from this executive that you've never seen before, because I am focused on building partnerships and holding people accountable in a way that allows them to be better and progress moving forward. My name is Karim Marshall. I'm number 2 on the ballot, and I'm asking for your vote this November. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Councilmember McDuffie.
To deliver on the promise of a brighter tomorrow for the least amongst us, it really takes someone who has deep roots, someone who cares deeply about the entire city, not just some neighborhoods. You see, for me, this isn't just about a job or winning a campaign. I am invested in what happens in DC across all 8 wards, and I have the professional experience and the legislative record to back it up. On November 8th, I'm asking you cast one of your 2 votes for me to ensure that we have leadership that delivers thoughtful solutions to intractable issues and makes our neighborhoods safer, giving every resident an opportunity to succeed here in our beautifully diverse city. My vision is one that reflects the visions and views of residents across our city, for those healthy, safe neighborhoods where parents can walk their kids to school and people who want to work can earn a living wage and small business owners can invest in their dreams and open their business. In short, it's a city that is more racially equitable, more socially just, and more economically inclusive.
Thank you, Councilmember McDuffie. And Mr. Hill.
Thank you so much for the question. And let me say that there is a lot of untruths that were spoken tonight by Kenyan McDuffie, Elissa Silverman, and Anita Bonds. And when you look at them being on the council for between 8 to 12 years, you can also look at the record of these committees that they were part of or chaired and saw that things were going worse every year. I am a person who's not doing this because I need a paycheck. As I said before, I'm a very successful business person. I don't need that money. But what I got sick and tired of watching is the people that were working around me or living around me not growing with the economy of this city, only because a few people wanted to look out for their friends and exclude a lot of our small business owners. We have over 2,000 small businesses, yet 10% of them are in $5 billion of this city's budget every year. So don't talk to me about how fair you've been or how in tune you've been with the people in this city. I live it.
Thank you.
And it's
Thank
time
you,
for
Mr.
change.
Hill. Thank you, Mr. Hill. Folks, that concludes our debate. To learn more about how to vote in this election, we invite you to visit DCBOE, that's DCBOE.org. And remember to visit DCDebates.com to watch this debate and others in their entirety. We want to thank all of our candidates, our community partners, and the Office of Campaign Finance for hosting tonight's debate. We wish you a safe evening and good night.